Hi everyone, this is Sagar, and in this video we are going to look at the very basics, the absolute basics of MongoDB. So before we begin, there are about three things that we need to know about MongoDB. So the first thing is that MongoDB is not a relational database, it's not a SQL database, rather it's a document database. The second thing to understand is that it's a NoSQL database, which means that it does not maintain relationships between tables the way we model relations in SQL database. And finally, we have to understand that MongoDB is a schema-less database. So basically, when we compare it with something like a SQL database, the way to model something in a SQL database is first we have to design a schema. We have to design the tables, the columns of the tables and their data types, their sizes, etc. And only after we create a schema, we be able to populate the data, right? When it comes to MongoDB, there is no such thing as schema creation, or there is no such thing as creation of a database, or defining the schema of any of the documents or records which we are storing in the database. There could be any structure. With any structure, we should be able to store data in the database. And the primary interface to denote these structures are JSON, and also that MongoDB is more JavaScript oriented. So the primary interface for MongoDB is also in JavaScript. So if you want to find records, if you want to perform CRUD operations directly in Mongo client, then we can do it using JavaScript. So in order to move forward, the first thing we have to do is install MongoDB. You could go to the MongoDB's webpage and download and install MongoDB. Alternatively, we could also run MongoDB if we have Docker already installed on our system. So I'm going to follow the second approach, which is run MongoDB inside a Docker container. So in order to do this, we have to execute the command docker run. Publish the Mongo port, which is 27017. -D is to run it as a daemon in the background, and then say which is the container, the image name that we want to run. So this is the command. So the moment you execute this command, what's going to happen is Docker is going to download the Mongo image from the Docker hub, the public Docker repository, the public Docker registry, and after that it's going to start the container. It's also going to expose the port 27017 to the host system, so that the programs which we write in the host system should be able to connect to localhost 27017 in order to connect to the database. Okay. So if we execute docker ps, it shows us the list of containers which are running, and we can see that there is a container that was created from the Mongo image which was created 5 seconds ago, and it was up for 2 seconds. So it appears as if everything is running correctly. So now let's connect to the database. So to connect to the database, so the database server is already running. So if you want to connect to it, we would require a client application to connect. So Mongo itself provides a Mongo shell using which we can connect to any Mongo database. However, since I created a container and ran the Mongo server, I don't have the Mongo shell installed on my host machine. But if I were to get access to this container, then the container already has the Mongo shell as well as the Mongo server. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to execute the bash, inside my container. I'll say docker exec -it and give the name of the container, and then say which command I'd like to execute. So when we do this, you can see that I got a prompt, a shell prompt, and this shell prompt is coming from inside of the container. Okay, and here if I were to type Mongo, then I would immediately connect to the Mongo database, which is in the local host inside of the container. Okay, so the first few commands will allow us to navigate any Mongo database. So I guess show DBs is the basic command we have to understand. This shows us the databases which are already running inside the this server. So currently there are only three databases that are created: admin, config, and local. They were created by default, so I wouldn't want to uh, touch or change anything in these databases. When it comes to creation of databases, there is no explicit command to create a database. All we have to do is we immediately have to start using a database. So let's call our database user directory and start using it. Okay. Even after we say we want to use this databases, when we say show DBs, it still doesn't show our database, right? Now, any database is basically, it contains data, different types of data, right? When it comes to SQL database, we call them as tables. So data is stored in tables, and we define different tables and store records inside these tables, right? When it comes to MongoDB, the terminology is a little different. So what is tables in a SQL database is known as a collection in MongoDB. And what is a record in a SQL database becomes a document in MongoDB. Okay. So in order to actually work to start storing records, we don't also have to create any collections or anything. We can simply assume that a collection exists and start inserting data into this. For instance, if we want to insert a document in the user collection, all we have to do is we have to say db dot and then give the collection's name, which is users, and then say insert one and give the JSON for the user data that we'd like to insert. So we'll say username Sagar Patke and password hash is going to be ABCD. Okay, there's a spelling mistake. So let me try this again. INSERT, insert one. Okay, so we got an acknowledgement saying that an object got created and it created against this ID, right? So db.users.insert1 is the command which is used for inserting a record inside the users collection. If you want to insert in a different collection, then all we have to do is give a different name here. Now let's look at the collections by saying show collections, and you can see that the users collection got created by itself. We didn't have to create it explicitly. Similarly, now if I do show DBs, you can see that the test database is also created. Oh, okay, there is a little problem here because I got disconnected from the shell and then I executed the create command. So I'm not entirely sure which database it created in. So let me again start the shell and then say use user-directory and then type the command again, which is db.users.insert1 this information, and now say show collections. You can see the user collections, and if I say show DBs, you can see that the user directory database got created. Okay, so just assume that the database exists, just assume that the collection exists and start inserting data into it. That's how we work with MongoDB. Okay, so after inserting it, suppose we want to get the list of all documents within a collection. We can do this by saying db.users.find. Okay, and it shows this JSON. This is a document which has been stored under users. So if we were to insert one more, then it would show us both of these. I'll just say there is another user called Sagar P with a different hash XYZ. And I can say find again, and now both of these records are actually being retrieved from the collection. Okay. Also, sometimes when the data is too large, this becomes a little difficult to read. So we can also say db.users.find, then say pretty. When we do this, it's going to pretty print the JSON. So it's easier to read this way. Okay. And if we want to find a record, for instance, if we want to find a record whose username is sagar.p, then this is going to be the statement db.users.find, and inside find we can type the query, which is again a JSON object which contains username sagar.p. Okay, here also we can say pretty to pretty print the JSON. Okay, this is how we find a record in MongoDB. This is how we query a record in MongoDB. Okay, so now let's look at how we can update a record. So to update, you can say db.users.update, and this update function takes two arguments. So let me separate them with comma. The first argument is going to be the query parameter of all the records we'd like to update. Okay, so we'd like to update the record which have username as sagar.p. And the second argument is what are the changes that we would like to make to this record. So I'm going to say that the change I want to make is I want to set the property password hash to PQRS. Okay, so in the response we can see that it matched one record and it modified the one record. Let's find this again, and now you can see that the password hash has been updated. Okay, now when we want to delete a record, we could simply say db.users.delete, and we can say exactly which record that we want to delete. So we can give the query parameter here. So here we are saying we want to delete the record with username sagar.p. Okay, so delete is not a function, it says. I believe delete one is a proper function. So the moment I say this, you can see that it has deleted one record. And now if we were to say db.users.find.pretty, you can see that of the two records, one gets deleted and then only one record is remaining here. Okay, so this is how we work with MongoDB. This is how we perform CRUD operations. So in order to insert, we say db.collectionName.insert and then give the JSON of whatever we are inserting. And when we insert, a new field ID is added, which identifies this document, which is assigned by Mongo itself. And after inserting, if we want to find a record, we can query a record, we can say find and give the query in the form of a JSON object, which is again, we can say username should be sagar.partk or sagar.p, for instance. Okay, if we want to update, then this find becomes update, and it takes two parameters. The first one is the query parameter, which identifies which documents need to be updated. And the second one is the update instruction, which tells us how to update this particular record. So we can say update this password hash to something, right? And the way to delete is, again, we can specify the delete, the query parameter here for a delete one function. Okay, so this is how we basically work with MongoDB. This is how we perform CRUD operations. So it's now time to connect to MongoDB from a NodeJS program. For this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a fresh directory. Let me open a code editor here. And as you can see, there are no files here. It's a completely empty directory. And inside this, let me initialize an npm module that creates a package JSON. Okay, and install Mongoose as the and install Mongoose. So Mongoose is a library which we use to talk with MongoDB. It's quite popular. The thing about Mongoose is it doesn't just give us direct access to MongoDB. It also allows us to define schemas and perform validations before we save data into the database. So all that is possible using Mongoose. So let's start by writing a very simple program for connecting and creating a record in MongoDB. So I'll create a script, a JavaScript file called mongo-test.js. Okay, and the first thing I'll do is import Mongoose. Okay, next, let's connect to the database by saying mongoose.connect and provide the connection URL. So localhost and the database name. And thirdly, let's create a schema. Basically forgot to import schema as well. So const schema equals mongoose.schema. It's present in the Mongoose object itself. And in the schema, I'm going to define username and define the data type as string and password with a data type of string. Password hash as data type of string. Okay. Then we have to create a model out of the schema. So user is the model. The first argument is the collection name on which this model is created and the schema for that collection. And finally, I believe this is going to connect to the user directory database, which we previously created. So let's quickly try and find a particular record. So if we want to find all records, we can say user.find and then give the query parameters here, which is, let's say we want to find all records. So find and just provide a empty object as a query parameter and say request response. Okay, so this is an async operation. Since the flow is going out of the program, the database has to come back with the response. For that reason, this is an async call, and we are going to provide a callback, which is invoked whenever the data comes back from the database. And this is, sorry, this is not request response, this is error and users list. Okay, so let's handle the error. If there is an error, let's simply log the error. Else, let's print the records which we found. Okay, I believe the program is now complete. So let's run it and see with node mongo-test. Okay, so you can see here that we are able to retrieve these users as expected, right? So if we want to create a user, the process is slightly different from what we do. So let me show you that. This is for retrieve all users. And let me comment this portion out. So if we want to create a new user, we can simply say const user equals new user and then pass the data for this user. Sagar.p and the password hash is something like this. And we can say user dot save. And in response, we get uh, this is also a callback. Since it's making a database call, it's making an IO call. Let's handle the error first. If error, let me start the program again. Node Mongo test.js, and you can see that the user is created successfully. Okay. Similarly, if we want to update a user, the process is very similar to that of uh, working in the Mongo shell. So we are going to say user dot update and then provide the query parameters to identify the user. We can say username. So this is the query part, and this is the update part. So we would like to change. We would like to set the password hash to 4 queues and then pass a callback. Handle the error. Okay, so we can get this, we got this user updated successfully and we got a response. So when it updates, it is not returning to us the updated user, but rather it is telling how many users got updated. So it's a response. Okay, and finally to delete. So this was for we would say user.delete one, give the query parameters, username sagar.p. We don't need the second parameter for delete, right? So just the callback, error and response. Handle the error. Deleted user success. Okay, so this is how we perform CRUD operations um, within from a Node.js program.